Yo, hey, what's up, guys? I got all the tanks to level 100. It's gonna go over Warrior, man. Warrior didn't really change that much, so it has one extra GCD in the burst window, and it got an upgrade to Vengeance, which is now Damnation. So it's basically just 40%. Once you get hit, it'll trigger the Primeval Impulse, and it basically just heals you. It's a hot overtime, so it's a direct upgrade. So the job didn't really change too much. There was just one extra GCD in the burst window. So this is the opener that I've been using. I've been doing a lot of EX trials and, that kind of stuff. This is normally the opener that I've been using, but you can adjust it a little bit. So I have 3 different openers here. I have a standard, an early inner release, and then a cursed as fuck pre-pull inner release. Let's just start with the standard. So it's almost the same, except for because there's one extra GCD in the burst window, which is Primal Ruination, you have to push your pot back by 1 GCD. Now, I want to point out here that I started to play strictly at 2.5 for all my tanks, and the biggest reason for doing this is because I don't like playing Paladin outside of 2.5, and the benefits of like 2.5 for the other tanks, in my opinion, are really good. The reason to stack skill speed, at least I used to anyway, is you basically had to fight for uptime sometimes, but that's not really the case anymore because they just give you uptime. So having a specific GCD to combat that uptime, it's not really a thing anymore. So I just said, screw it. I'm just gonna play 2.5. Obviously, there's other skill speeds you can play with. I recommend playing at the skill speed that you find the most comfortable. 2.40 is really good. 2.41 is really good. I'm also a fan of like 2.46, 2.47. Not the biggest fan of 2.45. It's okay. But another big reason why I've been playing at 2.5 is because the more they release content, the more I'm starting to see that the mechanics are actually based around 2.5. So for example, like in the EX2, there's a part where you get knocked up in the air. You can hit your GCD, get knocked up in the air, and then you'll land, and then your GCD will be back. So you don't really miss much. At most, you miss maybe like 25% of a GCD. Whereas like if you have a faster skill speed, you'll be able to hit that GCD, but then your GCD will come off cooldown as you're falling, so you'll miss more. So you actually lose out. It's just like real little stuff like that, but it's also fight dependent. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because what matters is, did you crit? Yes, then you're a winner. Did you crit? No, then you're a loser. But anyway, here's a standard opener, man, that I've been using. I pushed my potion back by 1 GCD because you want to get this. You want to get this last inner chaos under pot, and if you use your pot like here, the potion will fall off before this. I've been doing it here. You can also double weave pot now, which is really good. So we can go ahead and take a look at it. Basically, do a countdown: 3, 2, 1. Infuriate. I'm just going to use, instead of a potion, I'm just going to cheap out and use a, and you shake it off because it's 30 seconds. So this is pretty much standard, man. At least what I've been doing. I've had pretty good success, had good damage numbers. So as you can see right here, so this will be your last GCD, and you should be able to get it, and there it is. All right. Yeah, so that's pretty much the standard opener that I've been using. It didn't really change like at all. We can look at this one. This is the early inner release. This is basically the same thing, except for, you pop your IR right here. So you pop it like 2 GCDs sooner. The reason for doing this is because this is actually the top opener. And the reason why that you would want to do this is because sometimes you want your inner release up sooner. I actually do not prioritize the 2-minute window, the 2-minute meta. I don't. I prioritize activations. So what does that mean? That means that I tend to use my buffs early because you can typically get an extra activation. And an extra activation is better than getting 1 activation under buffs. So like if you can get 2 upheavals, then that's going to be better than getting 1 upheaval under buffs, if that makes sense. The same thing for inner release. Because inner release is it's a very interesting cooldown because you can use it and then immediately get this. Now, I wish that was the case for Primal Wrath, but unfortunately it's not. I'm not really a fan of the stack system. I wish that the stack system didn't even exist. I don't really think that there's a point to it. I think that once you activate inner release, you should just get this. But that's not the case, so it is what it is. Hopefully they change it. And another thing I hope that they change is I really wish inner release would grant you, like 20 seconds or 15 seconds of Storm's Eye somewhere in there. I feel like Storm's Eye is completely outdated. I feel like that it should just be a trait at this point. And if it's not going to be a trait, I really really wish they would add it to the job gauge, because sometimes, maybe it's just because I'm old or dumb or something, but sometimes I struggle to find my actual Storm's Eye buff on my buff bar. You know, it doesn't make sense to me that Huton used to have a gauge, and why the fuck does Darkseid have, like, why does Darkseid have a gauge but not Storm's Eye? That's very weird to me. Anyway, point is, you use this when you want to get in an extra activation. So typically I will blow my cooldowns early and hold them for buffs if possible, but I want to make sure that I get them on cooldown. So like for this, for example, I'll use top. It is very, very, very important that you get this on cooldown as soon as possible because of the push timings, because of activations, you know, that type of stuff. If you delay this, basically every GCD you delay this, it will be pushed back further into the fight. Sometimes that doesn't matter, but sometimes it does matter. And what does matter, it's very important. It's not that I play out of raid buffs necessarily. It's just my first priority is, okay, how many activations can I get in? I can get in 2. Okay. I can't get in 3 if I use it early. Okay. Then I will adjust by a GCD or 2 and make sure that as much potency as possible can be under raid buffs. But my first priority is always to check the activation timers and see if I can get in more activations. So anyway, so this is the reason for this opener. Now, right here, after this Inner Chaos, your Storm's Eye will fall off. Does it matter in the long run? No. It's a gain to use it here because you're going to get an extra activation. And the final warrior opener is this. This is a cursed as fuck pre-pull. You will use this very rarely. I'll explain why you would use something like this because it's not very common. There are fights where the kill timing, it will allow you to get an extra inner release in. So I know this looks really bad. You're going to use inner release at like 7 seconds. And then you're going to potion it like 1 and then you're going to dash in. Let's just take a look real quick. So let's hit the countdown here. And then you want to hit it somewhere around 7. So once it hits 10, you're going to 3, 2, 1. I'm going to pop this. And like I said, I'm gonna use a shake instead of my pot. I'm going to pot somewhere around 1 or 2 seconds and you're going to dash in. You're going to use this. You're not going to use Infuriate. Unfortunately, this is very, very bad. And then, you know, you do this. You're going to hold this. I know this opener looks really bad, guys. I know it does, but trust me, it can potentially be a DPS gain. If you can get an extra activation in, getting an entirely new inner release or extra activation of inner release, it's going to be a huge damage gain. So anyway, so as you can see, this is pretty much the this is pretty much the opener. It's just really, really, really awkward to use, and like I said, you're not going to use this very much. You would use this in like fights like P4, the door boss. You would also use this opener in P8, the true boss, and the reason why is because if you pre-pull this like super early, you're able to get in an extra activation before any transitions or downtime, and this will result in a net gain of 1 to 2 usages throughout the entire fight. That type of stuff is more important than raid buffs in my opinion. It is a much higher damage gain. That is the reason for using this opener. You will not use this opener very much. I would say normally you would use this one or even the early inner release, but they're virtually the same. If you're not pulling for whatever reason, you can cut out the tomahawk, obviously. In this opener right here, you have like one thing that you can adjust, and this is also depending on your skill speed as well. So like I mentioned, I use 2.5. If your skill speed is like super fast, like I don't know, like 2.40 or something like that, you can probably shift both of these up. No problem. It ultimately does not matter where you place these two. As long as you place these two within these 5 GCDs, you know, you're going to be fine here because raid buffs are going to go up somewhere around here. Like the raid buffs are like 20 seconds, so they're not going to fall off until somewhere like right around here. So like basically what I'm trying to say is putting this here is no different than putting this here. Warrior has become a little bit more restrictive in the fact that you need to put these 3 fell cleaves in to get this. This plus a fell cleave is more potency than an inner chaos. The burst window has kind of changed a little bit in the priority. So it used to be you would want to get like both your inner chaos in with your primal rend, and you would prioritize your fell cleaves less. However, because we have primal wrath now, you're actually going to prioritize your fell cleave over inner chaos. Inner chaos is still a lot of damage, but the reason why I say that is because if you miss this is huge. So like let's say you pop your inner release, then you do 2 inner chaos plus a primal rend, primal ruination, then you only have have 2 fell cleaves left or something like that, or let's say you have to refresh your Storm's Eye for whatever the reason may be. My point is if you lose this is huge. So it's very, very important in every burst window to make sure, like, if you have to make a choice between like getting this in and getting this in under buffs, you're going to get this in, because you're always going to get this in regardless. So what I would suggest, you actually dump your gauge. Warrior is one of the only jobs that you actually don't want very much gauge going into a burst window, because Inner Release provides everything for you. Well, Inner Release and Infuriate. So the last thing you want to do under a raid buff or in the burst window is just a normal fell cleave. Like a normal fell cleave is not exactly the best. What I would suggest, what I would do, is I make sure to dump my gauge entirely or as much as I can, and then I go into the burst with a prepped Inner Chaos. So I'll Infuriate and then I'll go in, and one of the first GCDs that I do is I do Inner Chaos once I'm at 90 or when I see the raid buffs. After that, it's really up to you to decide. I typically will use a Primal Rend right away because it locks you in place, so you don't want to like be trying to dodge a mechanic and then get locked in place. Or you can save it for when you have to leave. Like in EX1, there's a part where you need to leave max melee. Well, if you save your Primal Rend there, you can leave max melee, spam your Primal Rend, and then, you don't miss anything. You miss like an auto attack, that's it. So my point being is that, you can, Primal Rend you can kind of mess around with a little bit, but, the order of GCDs is going to vary depending on the situation. However, I will say that you should prioritize Primal Wrath. This is a lot of damage. It's going to be 580 crit direct hit on top of a 700 potency ability. So that's pretty much Warrior, man. I mean, honestly, it didn't really change that much. I'll have a link to the openers. These openers are like 99.9% done. This is during 7.0. There may be changes later on. If there are significant changes, I'll take another look at it. Last thing I want to touch on is holding your Primal Ruination and your potentially your Primal Wrath for 2-minute buffs. So essentially, you can hold these for 2 minutes. I would only approach this after you have completely GCD mapped the entire fight. And the reason for that is because to do this, you will need to delay the use of IR, which could potentially lose you a usage. And like I said, the way that I play, I always prioritize activations first. I am only going to do this after I know the ins and outs of a fight. Basically, the upside to this is severely outweighed by the downside if you actually miss the GCD or if you miss an activation. I would recommend only doing it, though, after you GCD map everything. But yeah, pretty much, man, that's it. Warrior's super good. I don't want to talk too much about the tank hierarchy on damage because that could easily change next week. This is 7.0. This is before the normal mode patch next week, so there's supposed to be buffs next week, so the hierarchy might change a little bit. But I will say that, Damnation is really good. It's better than I thought it was going to be. Also, Holmgang is still king of the invulns, in my opinion, and is still ridiculously fucking good. If you're new to Warrior or something like that, man, this guide is kind of like just my thoughts, my opinions on the job. From a basic standpoint, you literally just, make sure that your Infuriate doesn't ever overcap. Keep up Storm's Eye. Make sure you get in your 3 stacks of Primal Wrath every Inner Release. Just very, very basic stuff. Whenever you don't need Storms, Surging Tempest, make sure to use Storm's Path. I would, so me personally, I tend to overcap on Surging Tempest rather, if there's downtime coming. And the reason why I do that is because the difference in potency is just 10 gauge versus you can lose 10% damage on like 3 to 4 skills. Which is much worse, especially during prog or something. You can just kind of brain dead, spam 1, 2, 3, and then once you get a little more comfortable, you can start adding in paths. That is typically just for like kind of newer players, I guess. But eventually, you start to use path a lot more, and there are times when it is a DPS gain actually to drop Storm's Eye for 3 GCDs. A good example of this is P1 of DSR. You will want to use a path and then use a potted fell cleave, because a potted fell cleave is going to be more potency than Storm's Eye on these 3 GCDs. So like really little stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's not going to matter too much, so I wouldn't really stress it that much. But yeah, that's pretty much the basic concept. You keep Storm's Eye up, make sure this doesn't overcap. Make sure you don't overcap engage, and that's pretty much it, man. But yeah, man, Warrior is insane right now. It's really, really good. So yeah, I guess that's all I had, man. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Peace.